Welcome to this audiobook, How to Become Smarter Every Day, 10 Habits of Smart People. Before we begin our journey, I want you to picture something, a life where you grow a little wiser every morning, where your decisions are sharper, your thinking is clearer, and your progress feels natural. This book is not about sudden transformation or overnight genius. It's about simple, repeatable habits that accumulate into a smarter, stronger, and more capable version of yourself. Each chapter is a step forward, a lesson, and a practical way to grow. If it's always someone else's fault, you're not growing, and this single realization may be the most uncomfortable yet most powerful truth you will ever face, because the habit of shifting blame is so deeply woven into the way many of us respond to difficulty that we don't even notice when we are doing it. But every time we point a finger outward, we quietly close the door to growth, to wisdom, and to strength. Blaming feels safe because it protects our ego, it shields us from pain, and it allows us to avoid responsibility. But in reality, it is nothing more than a clever trick of the mind that leaves us stuck where we are. Think about how many times you've heard yourself or others say, "I could have done better if my boss had supported me," or "I would have succeeded if my family had believed in me," or "Life is unfair, and that's why I can't get ahead." And notice how each of those statements places the power somewhere else, outside yourself, in the hands of another person, another system, or some vague force of luck. And the danger of that mindset is simply, if the fault is always external, then so is the solution, which means you can never change it. And that's why smart people, the people who grow sharper and wiser every single day, learn to take a different approach, one that begins with ownership, not blame. Because ownership is not about guilt or shame, but about reclaiming the ability to influence your own life. When you say, "Yes, my boss was unfair, but maybe I wasn't prepared enough this time," or "Yes, my family doesn't understand me, but I can still choose my next step," or "Yes, life is difficult, but I can adapt," then suddenly the weight shifts back onto you, and though it feels heavier at first, it is actually a gift, because it means you have the power to grow, and that power is the essence of intelligence. Consider two people facing the same challenge. One loses a job and immediately says, "It's the company's fault. They never valued me. I'll never get ahead." While the other says, "They let me go and that hurts, but maybe I need to improve my skills. Maybe I can find a new opportunity. Maybe this is a chance to learn." And over time, which of these two people becomes smarter, stronger, and more resilient? The second one always, because instead of surrendering to the story of victimhood, they write a new story of responsibility and growth. This is not to say that life is always fair, or that others are never wrong. Sometimes people truly are unfair. Sometimes systems really do create obstacles. Sometimes circumstances are brutally difficult. But here is the deeper truth. You cannot control those things, and spending your energy blaming them only makes you weaker, while focusing on what you can control makes you stronger. Growth begins not when life becomes easy, but when you stop waiting for life to change and start changing yourself. Smart people don't deny hardship, but they refuse to let hardship define their limits, because they know that the moment you take ownership, you unlock creativity, resilience, and adaptability, and suddenly every obstacle becomes a classroom, every failure becomes a teacher, and every setback becomes a stepping stone. Think back on your own life for a moment. How many times have you stayed stuck in the same problem because you kept pointing to someone else? How many times have you repeated the same mistake because you told yourself it wasn't your fault? And how would your life look different if instead you had asked yourself, "What can I learn here? What part of this is mine to own? What can I do differently next time?" These are the questions that smart people ask every single day, not because it feels good, but because it leads them to grow. Growth never comes from excuses, It comes from ownership. Excuses keep you comfortable, but ownership makes you capable. There is also a hidden danger in blame that many people don't see. Every time you blame, you teach your brain helplessness. You train yourself to believe that you are powerless. And once that belief takes root, it shapes the rest of your life. Because if you believe you are powerless, you stop trying. And if you stop trying, you stop learning. And if you stop learning, you stop growing. But when you shift the mindset, when you say, maybe this failure hurts, but it's mine to study, mine to learn from, mine to improve on, then suddenly you are no longer helpless. You are a student of life, and every mistake becomes material for wisdom. This is why the first habit of truly smart people is simple but radical. They stop shifting blame outward and start turning inward. They stop saying, "Why me?" and start saying, "What now?" And this habit, though it sounds small, is the foundation of all others, because without it, curiosity becomes shallow, discipline becomes impossible, and reflection becomes meaningless, for none of those habits can thrive in a mind that refuses responsibility. Think of the greatest thinkers, leaders, and innovators. None of them grew by blaming others. They grew by taking responsibility, even for things that seemed unfair, even for circumstances they didn't choose, because they understood that responsibility is not about who caused the problem, but about who will solve it, and the answer to that question must always be you. This doesn't mean you must take the blame for everything in life, nor does it mean ignoring injustice. It means that no matter how unfair, how painful, or how unexpected the situation, you claim the power to respond, to learn, and to grow. That is growth, and growth is the true mark of intelligence. So let this be the first lesson of becoming smarter every day. If it's always someone else's fault, you're not growing. And as long as you refuse to grow, you will remain the same, stuck in the same stories, the same excuses, the same limits. But the moment you decide to own your mistakes, your choices, and your opportunities, you open the door to transformation, and once that door is open, the journey to wisdom truly begins. Curiosity is the doorway to intelligence, and without it, the mind remains trapped in small rooms, repeating the same patterns, blind to new possibilities. But with it, the mind stretches, explores, questions, and grows. And this is why smart people are not always the ones who know the most, but the ones who refuse to stop asking why. Curiosity is the hunger to know, the spark that drives discovery, the invisible thread that pulls you beyond what you see into what you could see. And when you live with curiosity, every day becomes a classroom, every person becomes a teacher, every moment becomes an opportunity to learn. Think about children for a moment, how they constantly ask questions. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly? Why can't I touch the stars? And notice how alive their minds are, how quickly they absorb new things, how unashamed they are of not knowing. And then notice how as people grow older, that spark often fades, replaced by pride, routine, or fear of looking foolish. And so many adults stop asking questions, stop wondering, stop exploring, and in doing so they stop growing. But smart people never allow that childlike wonder to die. They protect it, they cultivate it, they feed it with books, with conversations, with experiments, with travel, with listening, because they know that curiosity is not about entertainment, it is about survival, progress, and wisdom. The world is changing every day. Knowledge is doubling faster than ever before. Entire industries rise and fall within years. And the only way to keep up is to remain curious, to remain open to what is new, to refuse to be trapped in the illusion of already knowing. Curiosity is the opposite of arrogance, because arrogance says, "I already understand everything I need," while curiosity says, "There is always more to learn, and I am willing to learn it." And that willingness keeps the mind fresh, agile, and alive. Think for a moment about the greatest thinkers in history. Scientists like Einstein, inventors like Edison, leaders like Mandela. What set them apart was not that they were born with answers, but that they asked better questions, deeper questions, questions that others ignored, and their curiosity guided them toward discoveries that changed the world. And this is true not only in history, but in daily life, because the people who rise in their careers are the ones who ask, "How can we do this better?" While others simply repeat old routines, the people who strengthen relationships are the ones who ask, "What do you need? What do you feel? What do you dream of?" While others only talk about themselves, the people who stay resilient in hardship are the ones who ask, "What can this teach me? How can I use this experience?" While others only complain, curiosity transforms how you see the world, because it shifts you from judgment to wonder, from fear to exploration, from passivity to engagement. Yet curiosity is not just about asking questions, it is about living them, about seeking answers with patience and persistence, and being willing to step into the unknown without guarantees, because many questions will not have quick answers. Some will not have answers at all, but the act of asking stretches you, deepens you, sharpens you, and the act of seeking builds resilience. This is why the smartest people are not afraid to look foolish, because they know that asking questions is never a sign of weakness. It is always a sign of strength. Those who pretend to know everything remain shallow, while those who admit they don't know grow deeper every day. Think of the simple difference between scrolling aimlessly through your phone and reading a book with curiosity. In one case, you consume passively. In the other, you engage actively, asking why, how, and what next, and the second habit makes you smarter, while the first leaves you empty. Or think about two people listening to the same conversation. One waits only for their turn to reply. The other listens with curiosity, wondering what they can learn, what hidden truth is being shared, what perspective they had never considered before. And the second person walks away wiser, while the first walks away unchanged. This is the power of curiosity. It makes ordinary moments extraordinary, because it transforms every situation into a lesson. But curiosity is also a discipline, because in the modern world it is easier than ever to confuse curiosity with distraction, to chase endless shallow information without going deeper, to jump from one headline to another without truly learning. True curiosity is not about collecting trivia, but about pursuing understanding, following questions to their roots, and allowing yourself to sit with the unknown long enough to uncover something real. Smart people discipline their curiosity. They direct it. They focus it so that instead of scattering energy, they dig deep into meaningful areas. And this depth creates wisdom. So when you practice curiosity, do not stop at the surface. Dig, question, reflect, explore, until you reach insights that change how you think and how you live. And remember this, curiosity is a choice, not a gift. You choose whether to remain curious or to close yourself off. You choose whether to keep asking questions or to settle into routine. You choose whether to look at the world with wonder or with boredom. And those choices determine whether you grow smarter every day or remain the same. If you want to sharpen your mind, cultivate the habit of asking one more question, of reading one more page, of exploring one more perspective, of staying awake to the world around you, and over time, those small acts of curiosity will accumulate into deep intelligence. So let this be your lesson today. Protect your curiosity, feed it, practice it, because when you stop being curious, you stop growing. But when you remain curious, you can never stop becoming smarter, wiser, and more alive. Listening more than you speak is one of the quietest yet most powerful habits of truly smart people, because in a world where everyone is racing to be heard, few realize that wisdom comes not from talking, but from receiving, observing, and absorbing what others reveal. And while words may impress, it is listening that transforms, because when you truly listen, you do not just collect information. You gain understanding, insight, and connection. Many people confuse hearing with listening, But hearing is passive, a background process like noise on the radio, while listening is active, intentional, and engaged. The act of leaning in not only with your ears, but with your attention, your presence, and your curiosity. And when you listen in this way, people reveal far more than the surface meaning of their words. They reveal their hopes, their fears, their values, their unspoken needs, and the patterns of their thinking. And that is where real intelligence lies. Think about conversations you've had where someone kept interrupting, waiting for their turn to speak, offering solutions before you finished, or talking over you to show they were clever. And notice how that made you feel. Probably frustrated, unseen, even disrespected. And now contrast that with the rare times someone truly listened to you, letting you finish, asking thoughtful questions, remembering small details, responding not just to your words but to your emotions, and notice how different that felt, safe, valuable, and meaningful. And here lies the secret. The person who listens more deeply gains more than the person who talks more loudly, because listening builds trust, and trust opens doors that clever words can never unlock. Smart people understand that listening is a superpower, because when you listen, you learn. Every conversation becomes a book, every person a teacher, and the more you listen, the more perspectives you gather, the more patterns you notice, the more wisdom you accumulate. And this is how you grow smarter without even speaking. Consider two people walking into a meeting. One dominates the room with their voice, making sure everyone knows their opinions, while the other listens carefully, watching body language, noting tone, asking clarifying questions. And when the meeting ends, the loud one has impressed some people, but missed important nuances, while the quiet listener has gathered insights about the team's mood, the hidden problems, the real priorities, and ultimately holds the advantage, because information is power, and listening is how you gather it. Listening also sharpens empathy, because when you give someone space to share their truth, you momentarily step out of your own perspective and into theirs, and this expansion of awareness is one of the purest forms of intelligence, because it allows you to understand not only logic but emotion, not only facts but feelings, not only ideas but experiences. And when you can do that, you are able to connect, to influence, to guide, and to solve problems at a deeper level. Yet listening well is harder than it sounds, because the human ego loves attention. It craves the spotlight. It wants to prove itself, and silence can feel like weakness. But in reality, silence is strength, because silence creates space, and in that space people reveal truths they do not share otherwise. The greatest leaders, therapists, negotiators, and teachers are often those who say less and listen more, because they know that the value of conversation lies not in showing how much you know, but in discovering what others know, and through that discovery, growing yourself. But let's be honest, in today's world, listening is under attack, because distraction is everywhere. Phones buzz, notifications interrupt, thoughts race. And while someone is talking, most people are only half present, nodding while planning their reply, scrolling in their mind, or drifting into their own worries. But smart people resist this temptation. They discipline their focus. They put away distractions. They look at the speaker. They give the gift of presence. And in doing so, they not only learn more, but also make others feel valued, because to be truly listened to is one of the rarest and most powerful experiences in human life. And there is another layer. Listening is not only about others, it is also about yourself, because within your own mind there are voices you ignore. Your intuition, your reflections, your quiet wisdom that only speaks when you slow down long enough to hear it. And if you rush through life talking, consuming, filling every silence with noise, you miss the guidance that comes from within. But when you learn to listen to yourself, to your body, to your emotions, to the lessons your own life is whispering, you unlock an inner intelligence that no book or lecture can give. Listening is therefore both outward and inward, both relational and personal, and when you master it, you become not only smarter but wiser, because you are no longer reactive, you are responsive. And there is a great difference. Reaction comes from impulse, but response comes from understanding, and understanding begins with listening. Some people fear that if they listen more and talk less, they will be overlooked, ignored, or forgotten. But the opposite is true, because people are naturally drawn to those who make them feel heard. The listener becomes magnetic, because while others chase the spotlight, the listener provides something rarer: the experience of being valued, and that experience builds loyalty, respect, and influence that no amount of talking can achieve. In practice, this habit begins simply: pause before replying, ask one more question instead of giving one more answer, notice tone and body language as much as words, resist the urge to interrupt, and when tempted to prove how much you know, remind yourself that you will learn more by listening. Over time, these small shifts accumulate, and your mind expands with perspectives, your relationships deepen with trust, and your character grows with humility. Listening is not glamorous, but it is transformational, and it is the third step in becoming smarter every day. Because when you listen more than you speak, you move from noise to wisdom, from arrogance to humility, from isolation to connection, and these are the true markers of intelligence. Self-discipline is the quiet engine behind every smart choice, every meaningful achievement, and every long-term success, because while intelligence may give you ideas and curiosity may spark exploration, it is discipline that turns ideas into results and exploration into mastery, and without it, even the brightest mind remains scattered, inconsistent, and unfulfilled. Self-discipline is often misunderstood as harsh self-punishment or rigid control, but in truth it is the art of alignment, the ability to connect what you want most with what you do daily, the strength to choose long-term growth over short-term comfort, and the courage to follow through on commitments even when motivation fades, because motivation is like a spark, exciting but fleeting, while discipline is the firewood that keeps the flame alive through dark nights. Think of the countless people who set grand goals at the start of the year, filled with energy and optimism, but who quit weeks later when it becomes inconvenient or when excitement wears off. And notice how their intelligence or talent is not the problem. It is the lack of discipline, the inability to keep showing up after the novelty fades. And now think of those who quietly, consistently practice, study, save, or work toward a dream day after day, year after year. And notice how even if they are not the most gifted, they rise above those who gave up, because self-discipline beats talent when talent does not practice. And this is why the smartest people in the world are not just dreamers but doers who have trained themselves to keep going when it is boring, tiring, or uncomfortable. Discipline is freedom disguised as restriction, because at first it feels like saying no. No to laziness, no to indulgence, no to distraction. But over time those small no's add up to a much bigger yes, the freedom to be healthier, wealthier, wiser, and stronger than those who give in to every impulse. A person who disciplines their spending may seem restricted when they skip unnecessary purchases, but later they are free from debt, while the undisciplined remain chained to financial stress. A person who disciplines their learning may seem boring when they choose to study instead of wasting time, but later they are free to seize opportunities others cannot. A person who disciplines their health by exercising and eating well may seem strict, but later they are free from illness and weakness. In this way, discipline is not a cage but a key, unlocking the life you truly want by guiding you through the sacrifices that make it possible. Yet discipline is not built overnight, and it is not about perfection. It is a muscle strengthened by small, daily acts, repeated until they become natural. And the smartest people know this, which is why they don't rely on willpower alone. They build systems, routines, and environments that make discipline easier, like setting alarms, scheduling priorities, removing temptations, and breaking big goals into small steps, because they know that discipline is less about superhuman strength and more about designing life in a way that supports consistency. For example, someone who wants to read daily might leave a book by their bed. Someone who wants to eat healthier might stock their kitchen with better choices. Someone who wants to exercise might lay out their workout clothes the night before. And while these actions seem small, they remove friction and make the disciplined choice easier than the undisciplined one. And over time, this compounds into major growth. The beauty of discipline is that it transforms identity. At first you force yourself to act disciplined, but after enough repetition, you no longer need to push yourself because you have become the kind of person who does these things naturally. The person who struggled to wake up early becomes an early riser. The one who hated writing becomes a writer. The one who could not save becomes financially responsible. And this identity shift is the true power of discipline, because when action becomes who you are, it no longer requires effort. It becomes automatic, and this is how ordinary people achieve extraordinary results. Still, discipline will always involve some struggle, because the human brain is wired for comfort. It wants immediate rewards, and discipline asks you to delay gratification, to trade the sugar rush of now for the deep satisfaction of later. And this is never easy, but it is always worth it, because every time you choose discipline, you strengthen the muscle of self-control, and every time you choose impulse, you weaken it. Smart people understand this, and they treat every decision as practice, knowing that the small choices, whether to read for 10 minutes or scroll on their phone, whether to spend money on something useless or save it, whether to speak with kindness or react with anger, are not small at all. They are votes for the person they are becoming, and each vote accumulates into character. To cultivate discipline, you must also learn to forgive yourself, because no one is perfect and slips will happen. But what matters is not avoiding all mistakes, but returning quickly after them, because undisciplined people use failure as an excuse to quit, while disciplined people use it as a reminder to continue. And this persistence is what builds resilience. In fact, discipline and resilience are siblings, feeding one another, because the more disciplined you are, the stronger your resilience becomes, and the more resilient you are, the easier it is to stay disciplined through setbacks. At its core, discipline is about respect. Respect for your future self, respect for your goals, respect for the wisdom that growth takes time, and without it, intelligence is wasted, because no matter how smart your plans, without disciplined execution, they remain fantasies. Think of all the unfinished projects, unread books, abandoned diets, and wasted talents in the world, and realize how many of them were not victims of ignorance, but victims of undisciplined living. And then imagine what would be possible if those same people had simply stayed the course, one day at a time, one step at a time, refusing to stop. How much smarter, healthier, and more fulfilled they would be today. This is why self-discipline is not just another habit, but a foundation of intelligence, because it turns knowledge into action, intention into results, and dreams into reality. And without it, the journey of becoming smarter every day cannot truly begin. Reflection is the habit that transforms experience into wisdom, because living through something is not enough. You must pause, examine, and understand before the lesson becomes yours. And without reflection, you risk repeating the same mistakes, missing the patterns of your own life, and walking in circles while believing you are moving forward. For reflection is the mirror of the mind, the quiet space where you connect the dots, where you ask what worked, what failed, and what must change. And while the world glorifies constant motion, the smartest people know that growth happens not only in action, but in the pauses between actions, in the moments when you stop to make sense of what has already happened, Think about how many people rush from one task to another, 1 week to another, 1 year to another, never pausing to ask, what did I learn? What did I miss? What will I do differently? And notice how they often repeat the same arguments in their relationships, the same financial mistakes, the same unhealthy patterns, as if trapped in an invisible loop. And now think of those who practice reflection, those who journal at the end of the day, who ask themselves hard questions after failures, who analyze their choices before repeating them, and see how these people grow wiser, more intentional, and more self-aware, because they are not just living life, they are learning from it. Reflection is not about dwelling on the past or punishing yourself for mistakes. It is about harvesting the lessons hidden within those mistakes, about turning regret into insight and success into a blueprint, and this process does not require hours of meditation. It can begin with a simple pause, 5 minutes of asking, what went well today, what went poorly, and what can I adjust tomorrow? Because reflection is not measured by length, but by depth, and even short moments of focused reflection can reshape the course of your actions. The smartest people treat every experience as a teacher, but teachers can only teach if the student is willing to listen, and reflection is how you listen to your own life. Imagine a person who fails at a project and says, "It wasn't my fault," then immediately jumps into the next thing without thinking. They will almost certainly fail again in the same way. Now imagine another person who fails, but then pauses, reviews their preparation, their decisions, their effort, asks where they went wrong, and identifies one change to make for next time. This person transforms failure into wisdom, and wisdom into progress, because they reflected. This difference, repeated over years, separates those who stagnate from those who evolve. Reflection also strengthens self-awareness, the ability to see yourself clearly, and this is one of the hallmarks of intelligence, because without self-awareness, you are blind to your own blind spots, repeating harmful habits while believing you are doing fine. But with self-awareness, you can catch yourself in the act, adjust and grow, and reflection is the tool that builds that awareness. Journaling, for example, is a powerful practice of reflection because writing slows the mind, forces clarity, and reveals patterns you cannot see when thoughts are only swirling in your head. What you write day after day reveals what you value, what you fear, and what you need to change. And reading old entries shows you how far you've come, or how long you've stayed stuck. Reflection also deepens gratitude, because when you look back not only at mistakes but also at victories, at the good things you overlooked while rushing, you realize how much progress you have already made, how many small blessings you have ignored, and gratitude itself sharpens intelligence, because it shifts your focus from scarcity to abundance, from complaint to appreciation, from what you lack to what you can build upon. Smart people know that growth is not only about fixing flaws, but also about recognizing strengths, and reflection allows you to see both clearly. Yet reflection requires honesty, and honesty with yourself is one of the hardest skills to practice, because the ego resists seeing mistakes, resists admitting weakness, resists facing uncomfortable truths, but smart people push past that discomfort, knowing that pain is often the sign of a lesson worth learning. And if reflection reveals something you don't want to see, that is often the very thing you must address. In this way, reflection is not always pleasant, but it is always valuable, because truth is the first step to growth, and you cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. Reflection is also a safeguard against impulsiveness, because when you build the habit of pausing, you give yourself time to evaluate rather than react. And this space between stimulus and response is where wisdom lies. In relationships, it stops you from saying words you will regret. In decisions, it stops you from chasing short-term gain at long-term cost. And in daily life, it stops you from drifting without intention, because reflection constantly pulls you back to your core values and your chosen direction. In a noisy world where everyone is rushing, reflecting can feel unproductive, but in truth it is one of the most productive things you can do, because action without reflection is repetition, while action with reflection is evolution. Smart people are not those who simply do more, but those who pause, refine, and then act better, because better is always more powerful than more. So make reflection a daily habit, whether through journaling, meditation, long walks, or quiet conversations with yourself, and treat every day as a lesson to be studied, not just endured. Ask yourself, what did I learn? What should I release? What should I carry forward? And let those answers guide you into tomorrow with sharper vision and greater strength. In the end, intelligence is not built from experience alone, but from examined experience, and reflection is the bridge that turns living into learning, mistakes into lessons, and moments into wisdom. So remember, the smartest people are not those who never fail, but those who never waste a failure, because they pause, reflect, and grow, and this habit, practiced daily, makes you not only smarter but wiser, more grounded, and more prepared for everything that lies ahead. Curiosity is the fuel that keeps the mind alive, the spark that ignites learning, discovery, and innovation, because without curiosity the mind grows stagnant, content with what it already knows, unwilling to venture into the unknown. But with curiosity the mind remains young, vibrant, and ever-expanding, always asking questions, always seeking answers, always hungry to understand more of the world and more of itself. Curiosity is the habit that makes you smarter every day, because it pushes you to explore ideas beyond the surface, to dig deeper than appearances, to ask why instead of simply accepting what is, and to open doors you never even knew existed. And the smartest people are those who never let curiosity die, who approach life not with arrogance, but with wonder, not with certainty, but with openness. And because of this, they never stop growing. Think of a child who constantly asks, why, about everything, the sky, the animals, the rules, the stars, and notice how this relentless questioning drives learning at a speed unmatched by any other stage of life. But then notice how many adults lose this curiosity, replacing it with complacency, assuming they know enough, dismissing questions as unnecessary, and as a result they stop expanding, stop evolving, stop sharpening their intelligence. Yet those who keep their childlike curiosity alive continue to grow long after formal education ends, becoming lifelong learners who see every day as a classroom and every person as a teacher. Curiosity breaks down the walls of ignorance. Because it does not accept the limits of current knowledge, it keeps asking, keeps probing, keeps stretching the boundaries of what is possible, and this is why curiosity has fueled every great discovery in history. From the scientists who asked why the apple falls, to the inventors who asked, what if machines could fly, to the philosophers who asked, what does it mean to live well? Each breakthrough began with a question, and without curiosity those questions would never have been asked, and the world would remain dimmer, smaller, less advanced. Curiosity is not just about books or science, it is about everyday life, about being willing to ask questions in conversations instead of assuming you already know, about exploring cultures, foods, and perspectives beyond your own, about listening deeply and seeking to understand before judging, about wondering how things work, why people behave as they do, and what lies behind the obvious, because curiosity transforms ordinary experiences into opportunities for learning, and in this way it multiplies intelligence. Yet curiosity requires humility, the willingness to admit that you do not know everything, the openness to discover that you may have been wrong, and the courage to step into the unknown without fear. And many people resist curiosity because it threatens their ego, because asking questions reveals ignorance. But smart people embrace this vulnerability, knowing that admitting, "I don't know," is not weakness but strength, because it is the first step to growth. While pretending to know closes the door on discovery, curiosity thrives on uncertainty. It thrives on the space where answers are not clear, and while many avoid this space because it feels uncomfortable, the smartest people live in it, explore it, and expand it, because they understand that the greatest opportunities are hidden in what has not yet been answered. Cultivating curiosity means training yourself to see life as interesting rather than boring, to see problems as puzzles rather than obstacles, to see new information as an invitation rather than a threat. And this shift in perspective changes everything, because suddenly failure becomes a chance to ask, "What can I learn here?" Conflict becomes a chance to ask, "What is really driving this?" Success becomes a chance to ask, "What worked and how can I repeat it?" And daily routines become a chance to ask, "How can this be improved?" This attitude ensures that every moment becomes a teacher and every situation becomes a lesson. Curiosity also connects people, because when you are curious about others, you listen more deeply, you ask meaningful questions, you build empathy, and you gain insights into lives beyond your own. And this not only expands your intelligence, but also enriches your relationships, because people feel valued when you are genuinely curious about them. And in return they open up, share more, and teach you things you could never learn alone. The smartest leaders, mentors, and friends are those who ask questions more than they give answers, because their curiosity draws out the wisdom of others, and in doing so they grow smarter together. However, curiosity must be cultivated with discipline, because in a world full of distractions, curiosity can easily scatter your focus, leading you to chase endless streams of shallow information instead of digging deeply into meaningful learning. And the difference between idle curiosity and powerful curiosity is depth. Idle curiosity jumps from one headline to another, one trend to another, but powerful curiosity commits, explores, researches, experiments, and seeks understanding beyond the surface. And the smartest people channel their curiosity into focused exploration, choosing subjects that matter to them, pursuing them with passion, and then applying what they learn to life. To strengthen curiosity, you can start by asking more questions. When reading a book, pause to ask why the author believes this. When hearing news, ask what evidence supports it. When meeting someone, ask what drives them. When struggling with a problem, ask what alternatives exist. And over time, this habit transforms your thinking from passive to active, from consumer to explorer, from receiver of information to creator of meaning. Curiosity also thrives when fed, so read widely, travel when you can, engage with different perspectives, step outside your comfort zone, try new skills, and never let routine harden into complacency, because each new input feeds the fire of curiosity and expands the range of your intelligence. At its deepest level, curiosity is about wonder, the sense that the world is vast, mysterious, and worth exploring. And when you live with this wonder, every day feels richer, because you are not just existing but engaging, not just surviving but discovering. And this sense of discovery makes you not only smarter, but also more alive, because curiosity turns life itself into an adventure. In the end, curiosity is not just a habit of smart people, it is the heartbeat of intelligence itself, because it ensures that learning never ends, that growth never stops, and that wisdom keeps unfolding, one question at a time. And so if you wish to become smarter every day, do not let curiosity die. Feed it, nurture it, live by it, and let it guide you toward the endless horizons of knowledge, understanding, and possibility. Reading is one of the most powerful habits of smart people because it allows you to borrow the minds of others, to enter into their struggles, their discoveries, their wisdom, and their mistakes, compressing decades of experience into hours of learning. And in this way, reading becomes a form of time travel, letting you sit with the greatest thinkers of history, the most creative artists, the most daring scientists, and the most resilient survivors without ever leaving your chair. And this is why the smartest people in every era, from leaders to inventors to entrepreneurs, have been voracious readers, because they understood that reading multiplies their perspective, stretches their imagination, and sharpens their intelligence beyond what personal experience alone could provide. Reading is not just entertainment. Though it can be joyful, it is an act of mental training, a discipline of feeding the mind with ideas, stories, and facts that challenge assumptions, expand vocabulary, and strengthen the very muscles of comprehension and critical thinking. And this makes reading not only a way to gain knowledge, but also a way to shape the mind into a sharper instrument. Imagine the difference between two people, one who spends hours scrolling through shallow distractions, consuming snippets of content designed to vanish from memory, and another who spends the same hours reading books. Over time, the second person develops depth, focus, patience, and perspective, while the first develops little more than distraction, and this divergence explains why reading consistently builds intelligence, while shallow consumption erodes it. Reading teaches you how to think, because books are structured thought, carefully crafted arguments, narratives, and explorations that require attention and engagement. And when you read deeply, you are not just absorbing words, but wrestling with meaning, questioning claims, connecting dots, and building mental models. And this active process turns the brain into a workshop of ideas. Fiction stretches empathy by placing you in the shoes of characters unlike yourself, teaching you to feel what they feel, see what they see, and this ability to imagine other lives makes you more emotionally intelligent. Non-fiction sharpens reasoning by presenting arguments, evidence, and data that you must evaluate, compare, and understand, teaching you not just what to think, but how to think critically. Poetry, history, science, philosophy, biographies, all of these genres enrich different dimensions of intelligence, and the smart person reads across them, knowing that wisdom grows not from narrow specialization alone, but from the synthesis of diverse perspectives. Reading also improves communication, because the more you read, the more words you learn, the more styles of expression you encounter, and the more mental clarity you develop, and this spills into your speaking and writing, making you more articulate, persuasive, and clear. And in a world where ideas spread through words, this ability is priceless. A person who reads regularly is able to explain concepts simply, argue convincingly, and inspire others, while a person who avoids reading struggles to express even what they already know. And so reading not only makes you smarter internally, but also more effective externally. Yet reading is not only about quantity, but also about quality and application, because devouring books without reflection can become just another form of entertainment. And the true value of reading comes when you pause to absorb, to question, to apply, and to integrate what you have read into your own life. And this is why the smartest readers keep notes, highlight passages, revisit old books, and test the ideas they encounter in practice, because knowledge unused is wasted, but knowledge applied becomes wisdom. In fact, one powerful practice is to teach others what you read, because explaining an idea forces you to truly understand it, and in sharing knowledge you multiply its impact. Reading daily, even in small doses, compounds over time into extraordinary growth, because just 15 minutes a day adds up to dozens of books a year, and each book adds a new layer to your thinking, a new tool to your mental toolbox, and this accumulation separates those who stagnate from those who continue to evolve. The world is full of people who say they do not have time to read, yet they spend hours on distractions that add nothing to their growth, and the smartest people quietly flip this equation, trading a little distraction for a little reading, and reaping immense rewards in focus, wisdom, and intelligence. Reading also cultivates patience and focus, because books demand sustained attention in a world of constant interruption, and this training of the mind to follow a long argument, a complex plot, or a detailed explanation strengthens concentration not only for reading, but for all areas of life. making you more capable of deep work and less vulnerable to distraction. And this ability to focus is itself a hallmark of intelligence. But reading is not only a private act. It connects you to humanity, because books are conversations across time and culture, and when you read, you are listening to voices from centuries ago, voices from different lands, voices that challenge your assumptions and broaden your empathy. And this connection makes you both smarter and more human, because it teaches you that your perspective is only one among many, and that wisdom often lies in listening to those who came before or who live differently now. To cultivate the habit of reading, the smartest people create systems. They set aside specific times, carry books with them, replace idle scrolling with a few pages, and choose books that genuinely interest them, rather than forcing themselves into only what they should. Read, because enjoyment fuels consistency, and consistency builds transformation. They also balance challenge with accessibility, choosing some books that stretch their intellect and others that refresh it, because both are necessary for sustained growth. In a sense, reading is a mirror of the mind, because the books you choose reflect your interests, your struggles, your questions, and your dreams, and over time, your bookshelf becomes a map of your intellectual journey, showing not only where you have been, but where you are going. And the smartest readers do not only read for answers, they read for better questions, because every new perspective opens up new mysteries, and curiosity grows with every page turned. Ultimately, reading is not just a hobby, but a lifelong companion, a mentor always available, a door always open, a source of strength in confusion, of comfort in pain, of direction in uncertainty. And those who commit to it discover that books are not merely collections of paper and ink, but vessels of wisdom, carrying the voices of countless generations forward into the present moment. And so if you want to become smarter every day, make reading not an occasional luxury, but a daily necessity, because through reading you gain access to minds greater than your own, you stretch your thinking beyond its limits, and you transform your life one page at a time. And this habit, simple but profound, will mark you as one of the truly wise in a world that too often forgets the power of words. Critical thinking is the skill that separates raw information from true knowledge, noise from signal, illusion from reality, and in a world overflowing with data, opinions, and distractions, this habit has become more essential than ever. Because without critical thinking, you are easily manipulated, misled, and overwhelmed, but with it you become capable of seeing clearly, deciding wisely, and acting effectively. And this is why the smartest people do not simply consume information, but examine it, question it, and test it before accepting it, treating every claim as an invitation to inquiry rather than a final truth. Critical thinking is not about being negative, cynical, or doubting everything. It is about using reason, logic, and evidence to evaluate what is true and what is false, what is useful and what is harmful, what deserves belief and what deserves rejection. And this habit not only protects your mind, but strengthens it, sharpening your ability to analyze, compare, and connect ideas with depth and clarity. Imagine two people hearing the same piece of news. One immediately believes it because it aligns with their feelings. The other pauses, asks, where did this information come from? Who benefits from me believing it? What evidence supports it? And how does it compare to other sources? Over time, the second person grows smarter, less gullible, and more resilient, while the first remains vulnerable to misinformation. And this difference is the direct result of practicing or neglecting critical thinking. To think critically means to slow down before reacting, to question assumptions, including your own, to look for bias not only in others but within yourself, and to refuse the comfort of easy answers when the truth is more complex, because the world is rarely black and white, and intelligence grows in the shades of gray, where complexity and nuance reside. Critical thinking sharpens decision-making because it teaches you to weigh pros and cons, to consider both short-term and long-term consequences, to evaluate risks and opportunities, and to base choices not only on emotion but on reasoned judgment, and this balance makes your actions wiser and more effective. Critical thinking also strengthens creativity, because when you break apart assumptions and challenge conventional wisdom, you make room for new possibilities, new connections, and new solutions. And this is why some of the most innovative people are also the most critical thinkers, because they do not accept "this is how it's always been" as the final word. Instead, they ask, "Why not another way?" And through this questioning, they open doors others cannot even see. In daily life, critical thinking helps you resist manipulation from advertising, politics, and peer pressure, because instead of blindly following the crowd, you ask, "What evidence supports this? Does this align with my values? Is this choice truly in my best interest?" And by doing so, you protect your autonomy, your freedom, and your intelligence from being hijacked by others. But critical thinking is not automatic. It must be cultivated, because the brain is naturally wired for shortcuts, biases, and comfort, preferring quick judgments and familiar answers. And to think critically, you must train yourself to notice these tendencies, to pause before reacting, and to deliberately apply reason. For example, confirmation bias makes you seek information that supports what you already believe. But critical thinking asks you to seek out the opposite, to test your ideas against challenges, because if they are true, they will withstand scrutiny. And if they are false, it is better to know. Groupthink makes you conform to the crowd, but critical thinking reminds you that the crowd is not always right, and that truth is not measured by popularity. Emotional reasoning makes you equate feelings with facts, but critical thinking separates the two, reminding you that feelings are valid but not always accurate reflections of reality. Smart people train their minds to catch these biases, not to eliminate emotion or instinct, but to balance them with reason, so that decisions are not reckless but reflective. They develop habits like asking, "What evidence do I have? What evidence might I be ignoring? How credible is this source? And what are the possible alternatives?" Questions that cut through confusion and reveal clarity. Practicing critical thinking also means embracing humility, the recognition that you do not know everything and that you may be wrong, because arrogance blinds you while humility sharpens your sight, and the smartest thinkers are those who constantly test themselves, who invite debate, who welcome correction, because they understand that truth is strengthened, not threatened, by scrutiny. In fact, the ability to change your mind in light of better evidence is one of the highest marks of intelligence, because it shows flexibility, courage, and respect for reality over ego. Critical thinking also demands patience, because answers are not always immediate, and wisdom takes time to emerge. And in a culture that glorifies speed, the willingness to slow down, to think carefully, to sit with uncertainty before leaping to conclusions is a rare but invaluable habit. It transforms not only how you consume information, but how you live, because you no longer rush into commitments, purchases, relationships, or conflicts without reflection. You step back, analyze, and then act with clarity, and this prevents countless mistakes. At the deepest level, critical thinking is about aligning yourself with truth, and truth is the foundation of intelligence, because without it you are building your life on illusions, and illusions, no matter how comforting, eventually collapse. The smartest people seek truth, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it challenges their beliefs, even when it forces them to change, because they know that only by facing reality honestly can they grow and succeed. This is why critical thinking is not just a mental skill but a moral one, a commitment to integrity, fairness, and honesty in how you think and how you act. To build critical thinking, start by reading widely from diverse perspectives, engaging in respectful debates, questioning your own assumptions, analyzing media with skepticism, and practicing the discipline of evidence-based reasoning in your daily choices, over time, this becomes a natural lens through which you see the world, sharpening your intelligence in every area of life, because whether you are solving a problem at work, navigating a relationship, or deciding how to vote, the ability to think critically ensures that your choices are wise, your judgments are fair, and your mind is not easily swayed by noise. Ultimately, critical thinking is the guardian of intelligence, the filter that turns raw information into meaningful understanding, the shield that protects you from deception, and the compass that guides you toward truth. And this habit, practiced daily, ensures that you do not just grow smarter in knowledge, but also wiser in judgment, capable of navigating complexity with clarity, resilience, and integrity. And in a world where so many react without thinking, the one who thinks critically will always stand apart as truly intelligent. Adaptability is one of the most important habits of smart people, because intelligence is not only about knowing facts or solving puzzles, it is about being able to adjust when circumstances change, to bend without breaking, to shift strategies without losing direction, and to remain effective even when the ground beneath you is moving. And in today's world, where technology, culture, and opportunities change faster than ever before, adaptability is no longer optional. It is survival, growth, and success. The smartest people are not those who cling stubbornly to old ways, but those who can recognize when something is no longer working, who can learn new skills, who can pivot with grace, and who can embrace uncertainty without fear, because they understand that change is not the enemy but the environment, and to resist it is to fight reality itself. Adaptability is not about giving up your values or losing your identity. It is about keeping your core steady while allowing your methods to evolve, about holding on to your principles but letting go of rigid habits, about knowing where to stand firm and where to move. And this balance is what makes adaptability a true sign of intelligence. Think of the countless businesses that failed because they refused to adapt. Companies that ignored new technology, that dismissed changing customer needs, that clung to outdated models until they collapsed. And now think of the individuals who failed in the same way, refusing to learn new skills, refusing to let go of past identities, refusing to change even when life demanded it. And notice how their intelligence was trapped by rigidity, while those who embraced change thrived, growing into new opportunities, reinventing themselves, and staying relevant in a world that never stops moving. Adaptability is the difference between drowning in change and riding its waves, and this is why smart people cultivate it deliberately. To be adaptable, you must first accept that uncertainty is a constant, that plans will shift, that outcomes will surprise you, and that life will rarely unfold exactly as you expect. And instead of fighting this truth, you embrace it, treating every change not as a crisis but as a classroom, not as a threat but as a challenge to grow. This mindset transforms how you respond to setbacks, because instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "How can I work with this? What can I learn? How can I adjust?" And in that question lies your resilience, your creativity, and your path forward. Adaptability also requires emotional intelligence, because change often brings fear, frustration, or grief. And to adapt well, you must be able to manage your emotions, to calm yourself in uncertainty, to encourage yourself when things are difficult, and to support others as they face the same. And this emotional steadiness makes you not only adaptable yourself, but also a leader who helps others adapt. Adaptability also draws upon curiosity, because those who are curious about the new, who explore different perspectives, who learn from unexpected situations, adapt more easily than those who fear the unknown. And this shows how habits of intelligence work together, each feeding the other. Adaptability also involves learning how to unlearn, because what made you successful yesterday may not make you successful tomorrow, and sometimes the smartest step forward is to let go of an old belief, an old method, or an old assumption to clear space for a better one, and this unlearning is difficult, because the mind clings to what is familiar, but the adaptable person practices it regularly, asking, "What am I holding on to that no longer serves me? What assumptions need to be questioned? What habits need to be replaced?" And by doing this, they keep themselves fresh, flexible, and ready for whatever comes next. To cultivate adaptability, you can start small when plans change unexpectedly. Instead of reacting with irritation, practice responding with curiosity. When you face a challenge you do not know how to solve, resist the urge to give up or panic, and instead break it down, experiment, and adjust. When you meet new people or ideas, instead of dismissing them, listen and learn, even if you disagree, because every exposure expands your capacity to adapt. And over time, these small practices build the reflex of flexibility, the ability to pivot smoothly instead of shattering under pressure. Adaptability is not about being passive or drifting aimlessly. It is about being agile while still directed, about being like a tree that bends in the storm, but whose roots remain strong. And the smartest people live this balance, firm in purpose but flexible in method, committed to growth but open to change. The reward of adaptability is resilience, because when you know you can adjust, you are no longer paralyzed by fear of change, you no longer cling desperately to the past, you no longer feel helpless in uncertainty. You become confident in your ability to handle whatever comes, and this confidence itself makes you stronger, more willing to take risks, more open to opportunities, and more capable of thriving in the unknown. At its deepest level, adaptability is intelligence applied to reality, because reality is always changing, and those who resist change remain trapped in the past, while those who adapt remain alive in the present and ready for the future. This is why adaptability is not just another habit of smart people, it is one of the central ones, because it ensures that no matter how the world shifts, you will not be left behind, you will not be broken, you will not be stuck. You will grow, you will pivot, you will continue, and in the end, you will thrive. Emotional intelligence is one of the most underestimated yet most powerful habits of truly smart people, because while raw intelligence may help you solve equations, design systems, or memorize facts, emotional intelligence allows you to navigate relationships, understand yourself, influence others, and make wise decisions in moments where logic alone cannot guide you. And this combination of reason and emotion is what creates balance, resilience, and lasting success in life. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions while also recognizing, understanding, and responding effectively to the emotions of others. And this skill is not about manipulation, it is about empathy, clarity, and connection, because emotions are not weaknesses to be ignored. They are signals that carry valuable information about what matters, what motivates, and what needs to change, and smart people do not suppress these signals but learn to interpret them, to manage them, and to use them wisely. Think of someone who is technically brilliant but has no control over their temper, who alienates colleagues, who cannot listen, who misreads others, and notice how their intelligence is limited, even destructive. Now think of someone with average technical skills but high emotional intelligence, who listens deeply, manages stress, communicates with empathy, and builds trust. And notice how their influence and success often surpass those with higher IQ but lower EQ, because human beings are emotional creatures, and working effectively with others requires more than knowledge. It requires connection. Emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness, the ability to notice your own emotions in the moment, to name them, and to understand what they are telling you, because without self-awareness you are a puppet of your own moods, reacting blindly to stress, anger, or fear. But with self-awareness you can pause, reflect, and choose your response. And this pause is the foundation of wisdom. From self-awareness comes self-regulation, the ability to calm yourself, to manage impulses, to handle stress without losing clarity, and to remain composed under pressure, and this strength makes you reliable, stable, and trustworthy in the eyes of others. Emotional intelligence also includes motivation, the ability to use emotions to fuel persistence, to stay committed to goals even when setbacks arise, to replace despair with determination, and this inner drive makes you resilient because instead of being crushed by failure, you turn the disappointment into energy for trying again, smarter and stronger than before. Equally important is empathy, the ability to step into another person's perspective, to feel their emotions without judgment, and to respond in a way that makes them feel seen and valued. And empathy is what deepens relationships, strengthens communication, and creates the kind of trust that opens doors in both personal and professional life. Finally, emotional intelligence involves social skills, the art of managing interactions with others, resolving conflicts, inspiring teams, persuading audiences, and building networks of genuine respect and cooperation. And this is why leaders with high EQ are often more successful than those with just high IQ, because leadership is not about giving orders. It is about understanding people, guiding them, and bringing out their best, and emotional intelligence is the tool that makes this possible. But emotional intelligence is not fixed. It can be cultivated, and the smartest people deliberately build it by practicing mindfulness, journaling their emotions, seeking feedback from others, reflecting on how they handle conflict, and consciously choosing to listen more than they speak. They practice pausing before reacting, breathing through anger, speaking with kindness even in disagreement, and asking questions to understand rather than to attack. And these practices gradually rewire the brain, strengthening neural pathways that support self-control, empathy, and resilience. Developing emotional intelligence also requires courage, because it forces you to confront your own weaknesses, your own insecurities, your own hidden patterns, and many people avoid this because it feels uncomfortable. But smart people embrace it, knowing that self-honesty is the doorway to growth, and that facing uncomfortable truths about themselves is the only way to change them. Emotional intelligence is not about being soft or avoiding conflict. It is about engaging conflict wisely, about choosing words that heal instead of words that harm, about standing firm without aggression, about leading with strength and compassion together. And this balance is what makes emotional intelligence so powerful. In practical terms, emotional intelligence improves every area of life. In relationships, it helps you resolve misunderstandings instead of escalating them. In work, it helps you collaborate effectively and lead with influence. In personal growth, it helps you understand your triggers, your patterns, and your motivations, giving you greater control over your destiny. And in society, it helps you build bridges across differences, because empathy and communication can dissolve barriers that logic alone cannot touch. The world is full of intelligent people who fail because they cannot manage emotions, who burn out from stress, who ruin relationships with arrogance, who destroy opportunities with impulsive anger. And it is equally full of emotionally intelligent people who succeed because they know how to connect, how to inspire, how to adapt, and how to turn challenges into opportunities. The lesson is clear. Intelligence without emotional intelligence is incomplete. But with emotional intelligence, even modest intelligence becomes powerful. Cultivating emotional intelligence every day means checking in with yourself, asking, what am I feeling and why? How might others see this situation? What is the most constructive way to respond? And practicing small acts of empathy. Listening fully, showing gratitude, offering encouragement, apologizing when wrong, and over time, these habits transform you into someone who is not only smarter, but also kinder, stronger, and more capable of leading yourself and others wisely. Ultimately, emotional intelligence is not about controlling emotions, but about integrating them with reason, honoring them as signals, and guiding them with wisdom. and this integration makes you whole, balanced, and effective in every sphere of life. So if you want to become smarter every day, do not just read more books or solve more problems. Also learn to listen to your own heart, to respect the hearts of others, and to let emotional intelligence shape the way you live. Because in the end, it is not only what you know that matters, but how you understand, manage, and connect with the emotions that drive human life, and this habit will mark you as truly wise. Critical thinking is one of the most defining traits of truly smart people, because intelligence without the ability to question, analyze, and evaluate is nothing more than borrowed knowledge, but intelligence sharpened by critical thinking becomes wisdom, discernment, and independence of thought. And in a world overflowing with information, opinions, and distractions, the ability to think critically is not a luxury, it is a necessity, because every day you are bombarded with claims, advertisements, political arguments, news headlines, and social media posts. And without critical thinking you absorb them passively, letting others decide what you believe, but with critical thinking you pause, examine, and ask, is this true? What evidence supports it? What assumptions are hidden here? What alternatives exist? And these questions free you from manipulation and open the path to clearer, smarter choices. Critical thinking does not mean rejecting everything or being cynical. It means examining carefully before accepting. It means holding curiosity in one hand and skepticism in the other. It means training your mind not to jump to conclusions, not to be swayed by emotion alone, and not to fall into the comfort of groupthink, because real intelligence requires courage. The courage to think for yourself, to disagree respectfully, to change your mind when the evidence demands it, and to stand firm when the evidence supports you. The smartest people cultivate critical thinking by slowing down their reactions, because quick reactions are often emotional rather than logical, by gathering facts before forming opinions, by seeking out multiple perspectives instead of echo chambers, and by practicing the art of questioning everything, not in a hostile way but in a curious way, as if peeling layers of an onion until the core truth emerges. For example, when faced with a controversial statement, the uncritical mind might instantly agree or disagree based on feeling, but the critical thinker asks, who is making this claim? What is their motivation? What evidence do they provide? Is the evidence credible? What counterarguments exist? And by following this process, they arrive at a conclusion that is reasoned rather than reactive. Critical thinking also requires intellectual humility, the recognition that you may be wrong, that your perspective is limited, and that the truth is often more complex than it first appears, and humility is what keeps you open to learning, what prevents arrogance, and what allows you to update your beliefs when new evidence arises. Because without humility, critical thinking becomes dogma, but with humility it becomes growth. Another key aspect of critical thinking is the ability to distinguish between fact and opinion, correlation and causation, evidence and assumption, because so much confusion in the world comes from failing to make these distinctions, and the critical thinker sharpens their awareness of these differences so that they are not misled by faulty reasoning or persuasive but empty rhetoric. In practice, this means noticing when statistics are misused, when language is designed to manipulate emotion, when arguments rely on authority rather than proof, and when people confuse their personal experience with universal truth. Smart people also know that critical thinking does not mean thinking alone. They engage in dialogue, they test their ideas against others, they welcome debate, because conversation reveals blind spots and forces deeper reasoning. And in this process, they learn not only to think more clearly, but also to communicate their thoughts more effectively, because clarity of thought naturally leads to clarity of expression. But critical thinking is not only about external information, it is also about your own inner world, because you must also question your own thoughts, assumptions, and biases, asking yourself, Am I seeing this clearly, or am I influenced by fear, pride, or prejudice? Am I interpreting this fairly, or through the lens of my own insecurities? Am I resisting this idea because it is weak, or because it challenges my comfort? And in this self-examination lies the deepest level of critical thinking, where intelligence is applied not just to the world, but to the self. To strengthen this habit, you can practice exercises daily, such as reading diverse sources, instead of only those you agree with, analyzing advertisements for the techniques they use to persuade, debating respectfully with friends or colleagues, and writing down your reasoning for a decision before making it, then reviewing it later to see if it was sound. Over time, these small exercises train your mind to pause, to analyze, and to see beneath the surface of things. Critical thinking also protects you from one of the greatest dangers of modern life: misinformation. Because in an age where falsehood spreads faster than truth, only those who think critically can separate noise from knowledge, illusion from reality, and without this skill people are easily manipulated by fear-mongering, propaganda, and flashy half-truths. But with it, you become someone who cannot be fooled easily, who sees patterns, who identifies inconsistencies, and who makes decisions based on reality rather than illusion. And yet, critical thinking is not cold or mechanical. It works best when integrated with empathy, creativity, and emotional intelligence, because facts matter, but so do people. Logic matters, but so does compassion, and critical thinking without heart can become harsh, while critical thinking with heart becomes wise, just, and humane. Ultimately, the habit of critical thinking makes you smarter every day, not because it fills your mind with more information, but because it sharpens your ability to handle information, to sift, sort, and select wisely, and to apply knowledge in a way that leads to better decisions, stronger relationships, and a clear understanding of the world and yourself. It gives you the gift of independence, the freedom to think for yourself, the strength to resist manipulation, and the humility to keep learning. And in a world that constantly demands your attention and tries to shape your beliefs, critical thinking is your shield, your compass, and your path toward true intelligence. Lifelong learning is one of the greatest secrets of truly smart people, because intelligence is not something fixed at birth or sealed by the diploma you receive from school. It is a living, breathing quality that grows or withers depending on your habits, your curiosity, and your willingness to keep learning. And those who believe that education ends with graduation slowly become outdated, while those who commit to lifelong learning remain sharp, adaptable, and vibrant at every stage of life, because they understand that the world never stops changing, and therefore their learning can never stop either. Lifelong learning is not only about formal study or structured courses, it is about cultivating a mindset that treats every day, every experience, and every encounter as an opportunity to learn, whether it comes from a book, a mentor, a mistake, a conversation, or even a failure. And the smartest people do not limit their learning to the classroom. They make the whole world their classroom, carrying the humility of a student everywhere they go. The essence of lifelong learning lies in curiosity, the deep hunger to know more, to understand more, and to connect dots others do not even see, because curiosity drives you to pick up a new book, to explore a new field, to ask questions that others are too shy or too proud to ask, and this curiosity fuels continuous growth. When curiosity fades, learning stops, and when learning stops, intelligence stagnates. But when curiosity is alive, you find energy even in challenges, because each obstacle becomes a lesson and each setback becomes a teacher. Lifelong learners also understand that the brain, like a muscle, strengthens with use, and that by constantly challenging it with new information, new perspectives, and new skills, they keep it agile and strong, while those who stop learning allow their minds to grow rigid, inflexible, and dull. This is why many of the smartest people you meet are also the most humble, because they see themselves as beginners even in fields they have mastered, and this humility keeps them open to growth. Another key to lifelong learning is embracing mistakes as stepping stones rather than as failures, because every mistake carries within it information about what does not work, and if you pay attention, that information makes you smarter. But if you fear mistakes and avoid them, you cut off one of the most powerful pathways to growth. And so lifelong learners cultivate resilience, the willingness to try again and again, each time a little wiser than before. They also know how to learn across disciplines, not just within the boundaries of one field, because the world is interconnected, and many of the greatest insights come from connecting knowledge from different domains. Science with art, technology with psychology, history with philosophy, and this cross-pollination of ideas sparks creativity, innovation, and deeper understanding, making the lifelong learner not only knowledgeable but also wise. Practical strategies for lifelong learning include reading daily, keeping a journal to reflect on lessons learned, listening to podcasts or lectures on new subjects, taking online courses, traveling to experience different cultures, and surrounding yourself with people who challenge you intellectually, rather than only those who agree with you, because the people you spend time with influence the quality of your thoughts, and lifelong learners deliberately seek out those who push them to grow. They also practice active learning rather than passive consumption, meaning they engage with material deeply, ask questions, take notes, apply what they learn, and test it in real life, instead of just skimming or memorizing, because active engagement cements knowledge into wisdom. Lifelong learning also requires time management, because in a busy life it is easy to say, "I don't have time to learn." But the truth is, smart people make time to learn, even if it is 10 minutes a day, because they know that small, consistent learning accumulates into massive growth over years, and this discipline separates those who keep evolving from those who remain stuck. Furthermore, lifelong learners recognize that learning is not only about collecting knowledge, but also about transforming perspective, because new information challenges old assumptions and growth often requires unlearning, letting go of outdated beliefs or methods to make room for better ones. And this unlearning is just as important as learning, because a mind that cannot release the old cannot receive the new. Lifelong learning also nurtures adaptability, because when you are used to learning new things, change does not frighten you, it excites you, and you feel confident in your ability to adjust to new technologies, new careers, or new environments, while those who stopped learning long ago feel overwhelmed and left behind when the world changes around them. Emotionally, lifelong learning brings vitality, purpose, and joy, because there is a unique satisfaction in discovering something new, in mastering a new skill, in solving a problem that once felt impossible, and this joy keeps life fresh and meaningful even as the years go by. Spiritually, lifelong learning deepens humility, because the more you learn, the more you realize how vast the unknown is, and this awareness keeps you grounded, respectful, and open to wonder. The ultimate wisdom of lifelong learning is that intelligence is not measured by how much you know at any given moment, but by your capacity and willingness to keep learning more. And those who embrace this truth never feel old, never feel irrelevant, and never feel stuck, because they always see themselves as evolving, expanding, and moving forward. So if you want to be smarter every day, do not wait for life to hand you lessons in crisis. Seek them deliberately, actively, joyfully, and make learning your lifelong companion, because with it you will continue to grow not only in knowledge, but in character, wisdom, and fulfillment. And this habit will ensure that no matter where life takes you, your mind will always be alive, open, and free. Discipline is one of the most powerful habits of smart people, because while intelligence gives you the capacity to understand and create, discipline gives you the consistency to transform that potential into reality. and without discipline, even the brightest mind remains scattered, inconsistent, and ineffective, like a lamp without fuel, capable of producing light, but never able to sustain it. And when you look at the lives of successful people across history, scientists, writers, athletes, leaders, you will notice that intelligence alone never carried them to greatness. It was their discipline, their ability to show up every day, to focus when distractions pulled at them, to persevere when progress was slow, and to honor their commitments even when motivation ran dry. Because motivation comes and goes, but discipline is steady. It is the bridge between goals and accomplishments, between dreams and results. And the smartest people understand this truth deeply, which is why they cultivate discipline not as a punishment, but as a path to freedom. Discipline is often misunderstood as something harsh or rigid, but in reality it is an act of self-respect. Because when you are disciplined, you prove to yourself that your goals matter, that your future matters, and that you are worthy of effort and consistency. And this self-respect builds confidence, because every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen the belief that you are capable, reliable, and strong, while every broken promise weakens that belief, leaving you feeling powerless. So discipline is not just about achieving external success. It is about building inner trust, the trust that you can rely on yourself no matter what. Smart people practice discipline by creating systems and routines that support their goals, because they know that willpower is limited, but structure is powerful. And by designing their environment wisely, by setting clear priorities, by removing unnecessary temptations, they make discipline easier, almost automatic. And this foresight allows them to conserve mental energy for the tasks that truly matter. For example, a disciplined learner might set a daily reading schedule and protect that time like an appointment. A disciplined professional might plan their day the night before and avoid distractions until their most important task is complete. And a disciplined athlete might follow a training plan consistently regardless of mood. And over time, these small acts of discipline accumulate into mastery. Discipline also requires patience, because results rarely appear immediately, and the ability to persist day after day without immediate reward is what separates those who achieve lasting success from those who give up too soon. And this patience is a sign of intelligence, because the disciplined mind understands that growth is a process. That progress is often invisible until one day it becomes undeniable, and that shortcuts often cost more in the long run than steady, consistent effort. Another dimension of discipline is sacrifice, the willingness to give up short-term pleasure for long-term gain, because every choice carries a cost, and the undisciplined person constantly chooses comfort, distraction, or indulgence, only to find themselves stuck and unfulfilled, while the disciplined person chooses effort, focus, and restraint, and later reaps the rewards of growth, freedom, and success. And this is not about denying joy or living harshly. It is about aligning your actions with your values, choosing what matters most over what feels easiest in the moment. Discipline also requires clarity of purpose, because without a clear why, discipline feels like drudgery. But when you know why you are working, why you are pushing, why you are saying no to distractions, discipline becomes meaningful, almost joyful, because every act of effort connects directly to the vision you hold for your life. And this clarity transforms discipline from a burden into an act of empowerment. Smart people also know that discipline is not about perfection, because perfection is impossible and striving for it only leads to guilt and burnout. But discipline is about persistence, about returning to your path when you slip, about forgiving yourself for setbacks while refusing to give up. And this resilience is the true mark of disciplined intelligence, because success is not built on never falling, it is built on always getting back up. Cultivating discipline begins with small acts: waking up on time, finishing what you start, setting limits on distractions, keeping commitments to yourself, And as these habits solidify, discipline expands into larger areas of life, until it becomes a natural way of being. And when this happens, intelligence flourishes, because your ideas, your learning, and your creativity now have the structure and consistency to grow into real accomplishments. Without discipline, intelligence is like a scattered spark that never ignites, but with discipline, intelligence becomes a steady flame that lights the way not only for you, but for others as well. In the end, discipline is not about restricting your freedom, but about creating it, because when you are disciplined, you free yourself from the control of impulses, from the chaos of inconsistency, from the frustration of wasted potential, and you gain the freedom to build the life you truly want, a life guided by your values, your goals, and your deepest vision. And this is why discipline is not just another habit of smart people, but one of the most essential, because it transforms intelligence into impact, effort into excellence, and dreams into reality. And by practicing discipline daily, you ensure that you are not only smarter every day, but also stronger, steadier, and closer to the life you were meant to live. Resilience is one of the deepest and most transformative habits of smart people, because while intelligence can help you plan, solve, and achieve, resilience is what ensures that you can endure setbacks, overcome failures, and rise again when life knocks you down. And the truth is, no matter how smart, disciplined, or talented you are, life will test you with unexpected losses, disappointments, and challenges, and in those moments it is not your IQ or your knowledge that determines your future, but your resilience, your ability to recover, to adapt, and to continue moving forward despite the weight of difficulty. And this quality is what separates those who collapse under pressure from those who emerge stronger, wiser, and more capable. Resilience does not mean avoiding pain or pretending to be unaffected. It means allowing yourself to feel the pain fully, to acknowledge the reality of your struggle, but refusing to let it define you or stop you. It means that even when you break, you learn how to heal, and even when you fall, you learn how to stand taller than before. Because resilience is not about never falling, it is about never staying down. Smart people understand that resilience begins in the mind, with the stories you tell yourself when life gets hard. Because if you tell yourself, "This is the end, I cannot recover, I am a failure," you close the door on growth. But if you tell yourself, "This is a lesson, this is temporary, I will find a way forward," you open the door to healing, learning, and renewal. And this shift in mindset is the foundation of resilience, because the way you frame your struggle shapes the way you respond to it. Resilient people practice seeing obstacles not as permanent walls, but as challenges that can be overcome with time, creativity, and persistence. And they know that every failure carries within it the seeds of wisdom, if only they are willing to look for it, to ask, "What can I learn here? What strength can I build here? How can this hardship prepare me for what's next?" And in doing so, they transform suffering into fuel for growth. Resilience also requires emotional intelligence, because to recover from setbacks you must be able to manage fear, grief, and frustration without being consumed by them. And smart people learn how to process these emotions in healthy ways, through reflection, through support from others, through constructive action, instead of burying them or letting them explode destructively. And this ability to handle emotions wisely keeps them steady in storms where others might be swept away. Another key aspect of resilience is adaptability, because no recovery is possible if you cling rigidly to the way things were. And resilience asks you to accept change, to release what is gone, and to adjust to what is new. And though this can be painful, it is also liberating, because in letting go of what you cannot control, you reclaim the power to focus on what you can control. And this choice is at the heart of resilience. Practically, resilient people cultivate habits that strengthen their inner resources before crises even arrive, such as building supportive relationships, maintaining healthy routines, and practicing gratitude, because resilience is not only tested in the moment of crisis, it is built in the small choices you make every day, choices that strengthen your body, your mind, and your spirit, so that when difficulty comes, you are not starting from zero, you already have a foundation of strength. They also understand that resilience is not about going it alone, but about reaching out for support, because even the strongest individuals need community, encouragement, and perspective, and asking for help is not weakness, it is wisdom, because resilience is not only the ability to stand alone, but also the ability to lean on others when necessary. Resilient people also practice patience, because recovery takes time, and they understand that healing is not linear, that progress may be slow, and that setbacks may happen along the way. But they persist anyway, knowing that consistency will eventually lead to renewal, and this patience is rooted in hope. The belief that tomorrow can be better than today, and hope is perhaps the most vital ingredient of resilience, because without hope, effort dies, but with hope, even the heaviest burden can be carried. Smart people know that resilience is a choice as much as it is a skill, because in every difficulty you face, you have a choice to give up or to keep going, to sink into despair or to rise into determination, to let the hardship define you or to let it refine you. And every time you choose to rise, your resilience grows stronger until it becomes a natural part of who you are. In this way, resilience is not only a response to hardship, it is a proactive habit of strength, built through perspective, practice, and persistence, and it ensures that intelligence does not shatter under stress, but becomes more refined, more powerful, and more unshakable. The reward of resilience is not only survival, but transformation, because those who endure hardships and grow from them often emerge with deeper empathy, greater wisdom, and stronger character, and they are able to guide and inspire others who face similar struggles, turning their personal resilience into a gift for the world. In the end, resilience is the habit that ensures that all your other habits, discipline, adaptability, curiosity, critical thinking, do not collapse in the face of hardship, but instead endure, because without resilience you may start strong but give up too soon, while with resilience you can survive the storms and continue building the life you dream of. And this is why resilience is not only a habit of smart people, but also one of the highest expressions of intelligence itself, because it proves that you can think, feel, adapt, and endure no matter what life throws your way. Gratitude may seem simple compared to the grand ideas of intelligence, resilience, or discipline, but in truth it is one of the most powerful habits of smart people, because it reshapes the way you see the world. It grounds you in the present, and it gives you the clarity and strength to pursue growth without being consumed by bitterness, envy, or dissatisfaction. And when you practice gratitude consistently, you develop a perspective that multiplies your intelligence, sharpens your focus, and enhances your resilience, because you stop wasting energy on what you lack and start building with what you already have. Gratitude is not about ignoring hardships or pretending that everything is perfect. It is about choosing to notice what is good even when life is imperfect. And this simple shift of attention transforms your mental state, turning frustration into acceptance, stress into perspective, and scarcity into abundance. And smart people understand that gratitude is not a feeling that appears magically when everything is going well, but a discipline, a practice, a decision to focus on the blessings that already exist, because if you wait until everything is perfect before being grateful, you will never experience gratitude. But if you practice gratitude even in small and imperfect circumstances, your mind becomes stronger, calmer, and sharper every day. Think about how many people live trapped in the cycle of comparison, always measuring themselves against others, always noticing what they lack, and always feeling inadequate, because no matter what they achieve, someone else seems to have more. And this cycle not only steals joy, but also weakens intelligence. Because when your mind is filled with envy, your focus is scattered and your energy is drained. But gratitude breaks this cycle by shifting your focus back to what you do have, to the opportunities already within your reach, to the strengths already within your character. And when you see abundance instead of lack, you begin to use your resources more wisely, and that is the essence of smart living. Gratitude also deepens resilience, because when life becomes difficult and you face loss or failure, it is gratitude that reminds you that not all is lost, that even in hardship there are things worth appreciating. A lesson learned, a relationship strengthened, a chance to start anew, and this awareness gives you hope to continue when despair tempts you to quit. And in this way, gratitude fuels persistence by helping you see light even in darkness. Another reason gratitude is a habit of smart people is that it strengthens relationships, and relationships are one of the greatest resources in life, because when you are grateful, you express appreciation to others, you recognize their value, you strengthen bonds, and you attract more goodwill, while ungratefulness pushes people away, leaving you isolated and weaker. The smartest people know that no one succeeds entirely alone, and gratitude builds the trust, goodwill, and cooperation that make long-term success possible. But gratitude is not only about relationships with others, it is also about your relationship with yourself. Because when you practice gratitude, you learn to value your own journey, to honor your own progress, and to treat yourself with kindness instead of constant self-criticism. And this self-gratitude is not arrogance but balance, because it helps you acknowledge how far you have come, giving you motivation to keep going without drowning in frustration over how far you still have to go. Smart people also practice gratitude because it sharpens awareness, and awareness is one of the highest forms of intelligence, because when you are grateful, you notice details others overlook. The warmth of sunlight on your skin, the opportunity hidden in a challenge, the kindness in a small gesture, and these details, once seen, enrich your life and inform your choices, and over time, gratitude trains your brain to pay attention to opportunities rather than obstacles, to solutions rather than problems, and this habit of attention is what makes smart people appear lucky when in reality they are simply more observant. Gratitude also has a direct effect on creativity, because when you approach life with thankfulness, you reduce stress and open mental space for imagination, and you see possibilities where others see limitations, because your mind is not consumed by bitterness but freed by appreciation, and in this way gratitude becomes fuel for innovation. Of course, practicing gratitude is not always easy, especially in a world that constantly tells you to want more, buy more, and chase more, and in a culture that rewards complaining more than appreciating. But smart people resist this trap by building gratitude into their daily routines, whether through journaling, reflection, prayer, or simply pausing each day to acknowledge 3 things they are thankful for, and these small practices accumulate into a mindset that is naturally more positive, resilient, and intelligent. Gratitude also helps with emotional regulation, because when anger, frustration, or sadness rise up, gratitude acts as a counterweight, reminding you of what is still good, what is still working, and what is still worth holding on to, and this balance allows you to respond to challenges with calmness instead of panic, with perspective instead of despair, and with hope instead of hopelessness. Smart people know that gratitude is not just about moments of happiness, but also about perspective during pain, because gratitude does not erase suffering, but it gives suffering meaning. It places pain in the context of a larger story where joy and growth are still possible, and this meaning makes endurance easier, and endurance makes success possible. Gratitude is also deeply connected to humility, another mark of intelligence, because when you are grateful, you acknowledge that you are not self-sufficient, that much of what you have comes from the help, kindness, and support of others. And this humility keeps you grounded, prevents arrogance, and keeps you open to learning, because gratitude reminds you that life is not a solo achievement but a shared journey. In the end, gratitude is a multiplier of intelligence, because it makes every strength stronger, every resource more valuable, and every relationship deeper. And it transforms life, not by changing what you have, but by changing how you see what you have. And this shift in vision is what makes smart people not only more capable, but also more fulfilled, because intelligence without gratitude can lead to emptiness, but intelligence with gratitude leads to wisdom, joy, and peace. The final lesson is this: gratitude is not optional if you want to be truly smart, because knowledge may help you succeed, resilience may help you endure, but gratitude will help you live fully. And in the end, the smartest people are not only those who solve problems, overcome obstacles, and achieve greatness, but those who can pause, look at their life, and say with sincerity, "I am thankful."